welcome back to Lady Macduff, where today we are going to be reacting to, reviewing the Joel Cohen Macbeth film that just came out on Christmas Day. I saw it on Christmas Day, I've had some time to think about it, and so now I'm ready to talk. I'm honestly not going to talk that much about the acting today, just because, I mean, it's good, right? How could it not be? The acting is never going to be the issue with this. This is really, to me, a director's game. So we're just really going to focus on the director's choices and what they did differently in comparison maybe to other interpretations of Macbeth, just to see how effective the interpretation was. I am going to be revealing some spoilers in this video, as much as a 400-year-old play can be spoiled. Just, some choices, director things, creative liberties will be revealed, so watchers beware. Okay, so first things first, the aesthetic. It is in black and white, and it is very minimal. Some might call it stark, some might call it sterile, but I really think that the director's choice to focus on contrast is really a great choice here. It echoes the textual contrast, the antithesis that we're getting, like fair is foul and foul is fair, and what's done cannot be undone. And I think that the choice to have the film in black and white enhances that antithesis and those opposites that we're seeing in the text and elsewhere in the film. Yes, it's kind of stark, but that doesn't mean it's devoid of any humanity. It's giving expressionism, it's giving minimalism, but there's a lot of humanity still in this play, and the text is really good and really clear. And to me, that's really what makes good Shakespeare at the end of the day. And also, yes, it's clean, it's kind of filtered looking, it's dreamlike, it's nightmarish. It doesn't really feel like we're living in the real world. It's not, like a historical reenactment, and that's okay. That's fine. I really am enjoying something different that's happening here and the world that Joel Cohen was able to create. This visual contrast, the black and the white, the light and the dark, it really does a great job of kind of framing the dramatic contrast that we're seeing. At the beginning of the film, we get something that's very calm, very almost serene. And it's really incredible how we start from that and then go to something really big and over the top and dramatic, and emotions are pouring out. And so having that contrast of the stillness, the quietness in the beginning next to the explosive drama at the end, it creates that dramatic contrast that I think, is framed nicely with the aesthetic of the film. So the themes and the focus of the play, again, to me, it's really about the contrast, the opposites. Other interpretations of the play, the focus might be on the beautiful landscape of Scotland and beautiful men in kilts, and that's fine. Nobody's complaining about that. This is often said to be Shakespeare's horror film, and so some productions, like the 2018 Royal Shakespeare Company production of Macbeth that I saw in person with Christopher Eccleston, was heavily going for the horror. It was giving The Shining. The witches were portrayed by little girls in pajamas. Very creepy. Sometimes it's about the magic, like the Chicago Shakes production a couple of years ago. One thing a lot of productions do, I think, is tell us what they think is the reason behind why Lady Macbeth and Macbeth do what they do. Whether that's, his vaulting ambition, her vaulting ambition. It's this power thing. It's, elements supernatural beyond their control, forcing them to do the things. But the only thing that I'm getting really as a reason that they do anything is that perhaps the witch has triggered something that was already present in the deep recesses of their psyches. It kind of snowballs from there. We don't really know. So let's talk about material that was cut and then also the text. I think that basically every review is in consensus that they really did justice to the text. They didn't modernize anything. It's Shakespeare. There's also this incredible moment in Act 2, Scene 2, after Macbeth has come back from murdering Duncan. His hands are all bloody. Lady Emma's told him to wash his hands. And he says, rather will the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. Now, in the Arden, which I carry around with me at all times, obviously, it states that there are a couple of different ways that you can see that one line with the comma. In the folio, the comma is after the word one, making the green one red. And that kind of implies that the green one means innocent one, in addition to the sea being green. So it implies that innocence, which is really cool. But in this version, and the way that they have it in the Arden, which makes me think that maybe they even use this as a resource, which would be cool to find out. Denzel says, making the green, comma, one red, which in the Arden implies the totality of the redness, making the green, either the sea or the innocent, one, meaning completely red. So, little clues like that just tell me that there was a lot of thought that went into the interpretation of the text. The text was super clear. While I think that maybe in the beginning of Act 1, Scene 7 speech by Macbeth could have been a little fast-paced for my liking, in general, the text was very clear as someone speaking who knows the play really well, and etc. The text work was excellent. They didn't really cut anything super important. And if they did, I didn't really miss it. So how important could it have been, honestly? One thing that they did cut that I did notice was a line spoken by Lady Macbeth in Act 2, Scene 2. She, at the beginning of the scene, she's like, that which hath made them drunk hath made me bold, what hath quenched them hath given me fire. Then she hears a sound and says, had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. They cut that line completely, which in the moment, on one hand, I was like, well, this seems like a deliberate manipulation of her character to a certain extent, because that line is really, really potent, and it kind of sets up the fact that she's clearly not able or capable, has the capacity whatsoever to carry out the things that she, is wanting her husband to do. And they cut that out. And on one hand, I was mad about it. But on the other hand, I was not mad about it, because really the purpose of that line is to set up the fact that she is indeed vulnerable. She's not just this steely, cold-hearted killer, that she is a human. And I think that the way that he manipulated Coen. The camera angles showed us her facial expressions, her reactions, and then the way that she spoke her other lines. We got there. We got that eventually. So cutting that line wasn't, at the end of the day, that big of a deal for me, but it was an interesting cut. So one scene that was actually not cut, that oftentimes is, or if it's not, it, seems like it maybe should have been, was the scene with the old man and Ross. Now, what Coen does with the old man and with Ross is really cool, because the old man is actually doubled by the actor who plays the witch. Which brings me to, oh my God, there's so many cool things that happen with this witch. So the creative liberties that Coen takes with the staging and with the characters. So let's start with the characters. The first being the witch. Coen distills it down to one witch, one being who's then kind of able to split themselves. Another really interesting thing that Coen does with the witch is intertwine this imagery of the raven. Now the raven is a really important symbol and motif in this film, and a symbol back in Shakespeare's time representing death, a bad omen. Lady Macbeth says herself at the beginning of Act 2, Scene 2, the raven himself is horse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. It's like a bad omen, bad things happening. And so we start out the film with just a stark white screen, and you're not really sure what you're looking at. But then you hear this really dramatic swooping, flapping sound, and then see this raven circling overhead and you're like looking up at it as if you were like a dead carcass that this raven is like, is circling around. And so like throughout the film, you see the witch kind of transform into these ravens. There's a moment, the banquet scene with Banquo. Basically every time I see this scene, it's like, at the banquet, we have some kind of zombie version of Banquo, right? He's like rotting and whatever. He's like, ugh. But here, what Joel Cohen does is have just like a flash of Banquo. You see Macbeth follow him into another room, and then Macbeth starts fighting with the ghost of Banquo, right? Then Lady M and the rest of the guests kind of run into the other room to follow him, and all you see is Macbeth just fighting this raven, swooping around the room. Lady M then opens the window and lets the raven out. I just think it's such a cool moment that could really symbolize, Lady M just being able to let this go. It's just a very cool moment to kind of represent how this raven or the witch continues to mess with Macbeth's mind. It's a great motif and great imagery that carries the influence of the witch throughout the story. So now Ross. Ross is usually like not a huge deal. We're not really focusing on Ross that much, but Coen has really created such a dynamic and interesting character by, the creative staging elements and kind of putting him in scenes where he isn't in the play. For example, he kind of plays the role of the third murderer in the scene for Banquo's murder. It just like works really perfectly because the first murderer is essentially like, what are you doing here? Who sent you? And the third murderer / Ross in this version goes, Macbeth. So it's like Coen sets up Ross as Macbeth's kind of right-hand man. And we see Ross in all of these key moments of the film. One of the most interesting different things that Coen does with Ross is once he has the murder of Banquo has happened and Fleance runs away. You see Fleance kind of just hide out in the tall grass, and then Ross finds him in the grass, and then it cuts away. So you're wondering the whole film, what happened? Did he kill Fleance? But you find out at the end of the play, spoiler, that Ross has taken Fleance to the old man who, as we know, is being doubled by the witch. The old man has kept Fleance safe. And then at the end of the play, when Ross, who is actually the one in this film to bring the severed head and crown of Macbeth to Malcolm, which in the play, it's Macduff's job, because Macduff is the actual one who kills Macbeth at the end. But Ross does it in this version, and after that's done, he goes to the old man, takes the boy, Fleance, and then they leave together. So a really cool and interesting moment that totally works with how, like, all of the text that Ross is given, all of the roles that Coen has given him, and it's just a really interesting kind of dynamic to that character that I haven't seen in any other production, to be honest. Another really interesting scene with Ross is after Lady Macbeth gives her sleepwalking scene, and I say sleepwalking because of something that she does where it kind of makes us unsure as to whether she is actually sleepwalking or just awake. We see her at the top of these stairs, and then we see him looking at her, and it's kind of like this moment. Then later, the Queen, my lord, is dead. We see Macbeth go to the stairs, and then we see Lady Macbeth face down on the floor at the bottom of the stairs, dead. So it's like, did Ross have anything to do with this? What happened there? It's just like, I just think that good art makes you ask more questions than are answered. Coen really makes us ask these super cool questions that a lot of other productions may not. We inevitably kind of see ourselves in these characters, and Ross can be that example of, what would you do when faced with, tyranny, death, corruption? Would you be complicit? Would you do something about it? Who would you save if you could? How much of a risk would you take? What would it take for you to do something about it? So the fact that he was able to kind of make us ask those questions with this character that's, sometimes underutilized is an incredible feat. Another really interesting staging choice of Coen at the beginning of the play that set up Macbeth's character. Angus and Ross come in to tell Macbeth that, congrats, you're a Thane of Cawdor. And he's like, what are you talking about? And they say, Cawdor is a traitor. Here, you want to chop his head off? They actually bring Cawdor there, and they have his head on the chopping block outside of Macbeth's tent. And Macbeth, when Angus gives Macbeth the sword to do the honors, he declines. Macbeth declines and says, thanks for your pains. And he closed the tent curtain. Which I think is a very cool, interesting, powerful choice. That's definitely not staging, that's in the play. But it sets up the fact that Macbeth is indeed able to make choices. He doesn't necessarily get any joy out of killing people. And so it makes all of his choices to murder people throughout the rest of the play very, very meaningful and very potent. In my defense of Lady M in the past have said, he's a murderer from the start. I'm not surprised at all. This is in his character. But, Coen really changed my mind about that. And it made him so much more sympathetic. In addition to the very cool lighting that is achieved, which is quite theatrical, honestly. One of the many things you can't get when you're viewing something in an audience in a theater is that close-up on the face. And that close-up on the face can tell a huge story. Coen uses the medium of film to tell the story of Macbeth by utilizing these close-ups and these angles really, really wisely. For instance, in the scene where it is discovered that Duncan has been murdered, and somebody, I forget who, says, oh yeah, the guards that were in his room, they were all smeared with blood. It was probably them who did it. And Macbeth goes, oh God, I shouldn't have killed them. And this is, of course, paraphrasing. I hope you know. But once he reveals that he has killed these two guards, which was not a part of the plan, by the way, you get this close-up on Lady M, Frances, and she's gives him a look, which to me says, what? What did you do? Somebody else might be able to read it as, okay, nice, good job. There are so many different ways that you can read that close-up. And again, it's making us ask those questions. Here's what I love about this whole thing. I think that a lot of productions feel the need to explain Shakespeare, right? Oh, the language is so difficult, it's so hard to understand, and so I have to make everybody understand what's going on at all times. And I don't think this tries to do that. And I appreciate that to a certain extent. It just lets us ask questions. Because asking questions about Shakespeare, about art, about humanity, about love, about loyalty, is good. Asking questions is a good thing. And so I really appreciate how this production doesn't try to answer all the questions. It invites us to ask them. And I think that's what's really, really powerful about this. That being said, one thing that I feel didn't work super well was the very brief scene with the porter. It's supposed to be comic relief, but this porter scene didn't really work for me because, so first of all, the porter didn't really command the attention of Macduff and Lennox, who were, the ones knocking at the gate. Usually it's bawdy humor, right? He's talking about erections and whatever. But they're not really paying attention to him. He's kind of more like a mosquito buzzing around them than really, they kind of chuckle at his, drunkenness and his jokes, but it felt a little bit out of place. There are a million other things to talk about, I could go on and on and on. In general, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this production. It made me notice things about, I've seen this play 1,000 times. You all know that. You should know that by the amount of Macbeth content I have on this channel. About half my videos have to do with it. I love this play. It means a lot to me. So I don't say any of this very lightly. I would have slammed it if I thought it was horrible. I would love to hear the perspective of somebody who has never seen it before, was not really a Shakespeare fan. It's not Baz Luhrmann, okay? Which, thank God. Just kidding. It's not even like the Kenneth Branagh, you know, like these beautiful landscapes of Italy or Scotland, and like the Baroque, the details, the gold, the jewelry, the, you know, the fire, the whatever. Like, it doesn't give us that, but I don't mind. I don't care, because my mind was still really interested in all the motifs, the themes, the text, the relationships, the choices. Do I think that there are elements of it that people who aren't familiar with Shakespeare could enjoy? Yeah. I love the black and white. I love the contrast, the pitch blackness of the ravens against the white sky, the questioning of the motives and intentions of the witch, of Ross, of Malcolm, of all these other people. I mean, the acting was phenomenal. Don't even get me started on the Lady Macduff scene. It's obviously one of my favorite scenes in all of Shakespeare, period. And I love Lady Macduff. I mean, Moses, the acting, honey, it's so good. You know, at the end of the day, it was good Shakespeare. It was good text. I felt that the visual story helped tell the human story. I felt like, you know, having these motifs and these symbols to grasp onto, the fact that we're asking questions, and he's answering some questions, but posing more in the process of doing that, is really, really incredible, really ingenious. We're allowed the space to make up our own mind about the characters, their intentions, their past, what they want. And it's not like kind of, you know, force-fed to us, which I really appreciate. It's gonna make people uncomfortable, I think, in that sense. Like, it doesn't over-explain Shakespeare, which I think that we want it to feel real to us, because maybe there's a distance between us and the language. But I think that he really respects the poetry, respects the language, and it was really beautifully done. Cast, incredible. Lighting, how dare you? So good. Costumes, nice. Chill, minimal, not drawing too much attention. The choices, like these little tiny moments. I'd love to see it again, and I really want to hear what you all think. Seriously, I am dying to hear your thoughts. If you're a Shakespeare freak, such as myself, if you are new to Shakespeare and you saw the film, please let me know what you think. I really enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was something super different, and it made me think about the play in a different way, when, trust me, I think about this play a lot. So if it can do that, it had to have done something right. I really enjoyed talking to you all. I hope you go see this film and that you enjoy it too. I'll see you next time in 2022. Bye-bye.